Welcome back to another episode of Days of Yore and Lore. To greatly help this channel grow, please do not forget to like and subscribe, and please enjoy the video. The RMS Titanic, like many other ships, had a series of officers who supported the captain in his duties aboard. These officers helped manage the load in the running of the ship and making sure everything ran smoothly. Lieutenant Henry Wilde was the chief officer, meaning he answers directly to the captain and is the next underneath him in hierarchy. He went down with the ship after helping passengers on board lifeboats and worked on the collapsible lifeboats. One of his special tasks that was only assigned to him was to keep the ship's log, or journal. A ship's log is designed to keep a record of every important event in the management, operation and navigation of a ship. This is a task that must be filled out daily and is essential to traditional navigation and can quite often be used to estimate a ship's speed. Lieutenant William Murdoch was the first officer on board the RMS Titanic. As famously depicted in James Cameron's film, Murdoch was the officer in charge of the deck when she hit the iceberg. He died on board the RMS Titanic, although his death is debated from circumstantial evidence. Lieutenant William Murdoch's specifically assigned first officer's role was being in charge of both the crew and the cargo. This can be seen with him taking charge and launching the 10 lifeboats on the starboard side of the ship. Charles Herbert Lightoller was the second officer and most senior officer to survive the RMS Titanic disaster. Like the other officers, he had a series of tasks shared aboard the ship, his most infamous task being that of launching lifeboats on the port side. His specifically assigned task was being in charge of navigation. This was a significantly important task as it meant constantly knowing both the exact location of the ship along with all nearby ships at all times. Third officer was Herbert Pitman. Pitman survived the Titanic disaster after being ordered into a lifeboat and taking control of it by First Officer Murdoch. One of his assigned tasks, only for the third officer, was to be in charge of safety. In modern day, we would refer to this as a safety officer, someone in charge of promoting safety through inspections and keeping the environment as hazard-free as possible. Joseph Boxhall was the fourth officer on board the Titanic. Boxhall's special task was to update the ship's charts. This meant that it was Boxhall who calculated the exact location and position so that the distress signal could be sent out. Boxhall was also the officer who attempted to signal the SS Californian through Morse lamps and distress flares, though he was unsuccessful. He was placed in charge of Lifeboat 2 when it was launched and was one of the first officers to spot the RMS Carpathia at 4 a.m. By maintaining the ship's charts also meant adding known icebergs onto the charts as they had been relayed across by the wireless. Fifth Officer Harold Lowe is the last of the officers in this video to survive the Titanic disaster. He survived after being ordered onto Lifeboat 14 by 6th Officer Moody. Harold Lowe has been immortalised by James Cameron's film The Titanic as the officer who went back for survivors after the ship foundered. His specific assigned task was to measure air and water temperatures to assess the likelihood of meeting icebergs. 6th Officer James Moody was not only the youngest officer, but is the only junior officer to die in the sinking. His specific assigned task was in charge of the gangways during the boarding and offloading of the passengers. This was only in effect on Southampton, although he did help with getting passengers on board without the use of gangways during the boardings at Cherbourg, France and Queenstown, Ireland. Moody insisted that Lowe was the officer to man Lifeboat 14, stating, "You go, I will get in another boat," although this never happened. The other officer on board the RMS Titanic was the chief purser Hugh McElroy. McElroy was in charge of the stewards as his special duty. A chief purser, in case anyone was wondering, is a position which involves ship clearance, managing the company's safe and handling all of the ship's documents. It is not often referred to as an admin role, as a chief purser is usually in charge and supervises the front desk or admin team. McElroy was one of the few officers whose body was recovered and identified. McElroy was identified after his body was recovered by the crew of the Mackie Bennett through his effects, which included a letter addressed to Miss McElroy. He was then subsequently buried at sea. And there you have it, all the officers and their special tasks aboard the RMS Titanic. Please leave me a comment down below if you would like me to go into more details about each of the officers and their captain of the ill-fated RMS Titanic.